smile. I love when you blush. Can I hang for a while? I said, I love your smile. I love when you blush. Can I hang for a while? Cause yo, cause yo, I said, cause yo.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of the Environment Report. I'm John Atkinson with
Graham Jordison.
We also have in the studio
John Pollock
and
Justine Marshall.
Wonderful. We got a good crew, and we've got so many people here for you tonight. We can't fit them all in the same room. So such a crowd. It's raining outside, and we always
Sleeting.
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 Oh man,
Sleeting.
it's May Day. Happy May Day, by the way, to everybody.
Happy May Day.
Yes.
It is an American holiday started in America by, I believe it was the International Lady Garment Workers Union, which I think perhaps we should export some of that history to Bangladesh.
Mm-hmm.
We went through that mess with the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire and helped to get that union off to it was one of the big impetus for organizing workers, a safety issue.
Mm-hmm.
And our thoughts go out to those people who died in that totally unnecessary massacre by employer in Bangladesh. But that's what May Day is about, and
Happy
it's
May
good
Day.
for us to remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, John, are you responsible for this sleet, man? And swallow that mic, I think. But at about this distance, and you'll be good.
Holy cow. All right. I deny responsibility for any of the weather. This is a blanket policy. I just forecast it, enjoy it, or lament it, but I don't control it. Okay. We are actually in a winter weather advisory, and believe it or not, it has snowed in May before, but it's been a long time. The last time that the Omaha and Lincoln areas had measurable snow in May was May 3rd, 1967. I'm going to lay this one to so-called global weirding. We had a jet stream that came straight south out of Canada in a couple of blasts, and it's a very narrow, wiggly jet stream that's a very unusual pattern. It comes out of western Canada, dips down actually south of us into toward the Oklahoma Panhandle, goes up through us, hits the southwest tip of Greenland, and then dives south into the Atlantic at about the latitude of Florida. So it's this extreme north-south movement of the air and the rather strong nature of the jet stream that is bringing us enough cold weather that we can actually change this rain over to snow, even though it's so late in the season. And we were kind of looking at it a little bit last week, but a week out the models were unreliable, and it is here. We will probably have measurable snow starting late this evening, continuing overnight. There's a band of moderate to heavy snow that's probably 50 miles wide, and because it's banded, it really gives the meteorologist fits, because even from one part of a county to the next, you can have a significant change from almost nothing, just a little bit of mush, to heavy snow that have people ready to throw the shovel at the forecaster. And
Would they really do that, John?
they'd love to. If I stood in one place long enough, they'd probably chase me down, especially in May. So, yeah, this is actually a significant winter weather situation, or really a spring storm situation, because it's also what we call convective. Instead of being spread out over a large area, it's got lumps and bumps. There might even be a little bit of lightning in it, and where we get the heaviest stuff, it could accumulate very heavily, and other places practically nothing. It's going to be really hit and miss.
Is it unusual to have thunder and lightning in a snowstorm? Seems
Unusual, but not so unusual in the spring as it is in the winter. When we get the jet stream going, there's a lot more energy in the atmosphere in general in the spring than there is in the winter, because we have the strong temperature contrast, humidity from the south. So it's a little easier to get thunder in the winter, or rather in the spring than in the winter. But it can really produce some heavy snow when you have your temperatures near freezing, as we will tonight.
So we got snow and ice in the spring. Does that mean global warming has reversed itself?
Not if you were to talk to people in the East Coast, the West Coast, over a large area. What we have is a narrow area that's getting socked, which is us, and a rather large area of above normal temperatures. So when you average it out, then you get above normal. But the average, of course, doesn't tell the whole story because we're getting all these extremes superimposed on it. And that's not so good. Believe me, southern Greenland is heading for a historic heat wave, but there aren't very many people that live there, and not too many people around here that really care what's going on in southern Greenland.
Yeah, but there's a lot of
melts.
ice. Yeah, right. And so here we are in the spring, and I heard you talking earlier about the Nebraska state flower, and just to remind everybody, we do come to you from Omaha, Nebraska. And we have a state flower that's a what?
Goldenrod.
In the spring.
Well, no, goldenrod's in the fall.
Uh-huh.
Goldenrod is a nice, beautiful, golden-colored fall flower that a lot of people blame for their allergy problems.
I do.
But I'm going to give you a little bit of ecology here. When you think about flowers, the plant that makes a flower that you notice, a pretty flower, it's advertising to pollinators. And that's, mostly bees, but there are some flies and other critters, moths, that will pollinate. And in order to advertise, they have nectar, they have a scent, they have a color, and they look kind of nice, and they look nice to those pollinators. So the idea, the plant is expending energy. Well, if you're going to advertise, it takes energy. You want to get something back. It attracts the pollinators. They visit the flower, and when they visit the flower, the pollen has to stick to the body of the insect. When it sticks, then it visits the next flower, and some of the pollen will come off on the next flower. But think about that. If you've got sticky pollen, it's going together in clumps. And those clumps don't get very far by themselves. And you're unlikely to be breathing in very many of them. I mean, if you stuck your nose, well, kids know, if you stick your nose in a dandelion, it'll come up yellow because the pollen is sticky. That's another good example of a common flower that attracts pollinators. But there isn't much dandelion pollen in the air. The real offenders are the things that bloom at the same time. They tend to have inconspicuous green flowers. They're not relying on pollinators. They're relying on putting massive quantities of pollen out into the wind, let it blow where it wants to, which some of it's on other plants of the same species, some of it is up your nose, and it doesn't really care where. A lot of trees, we have elms, oaks, birch, things like that, cottonwoods, rely on the wind pollination method. And in the fall, we have a group including ragweed, amaranth, otherwise known as pigweed, lamb's quarters, that are prolific pollen producers that bloom exactly the same time as that goldenrod and give you a miserable time.
Wait a minute, you're telling me the lamb's quarters, I can go out in the rear of the backyard and pick and eat for salads and so forth. That's giving me hay fever?
It could be. More likely it's ragweed because that seems to be a little more allergenic. But lamb's quarters is a classic example of a wind-pollinated plant. You hardly even notice the flowers. They're very inconspicuous, but it puts out lots of pollen.
Well, now I'm going to notice, and I'm going to pinch their little heads off. Let me tell you that. You know?
So back to the weather. What does this rain, sleet, possibly snow mean for the drought that we've been experiencing? I know last time I think you said it was going to take around 5 inches of a good solid rain. Are we looking better in terms of progress of getting rid of that, or?
Well, this is looking better so far. My caveat here is that this amount of rain that we're getting this time is probably not going to help a whole lot. We're probably looking at an inch of rain, but it's so cool that we might be looking at another half inch of evaporation that won't be taking place, that would normally be taking place. So it might be the equivalent of about an inch and a half. However, what still bothers me is that this pattern has such extremes in it, and it's moving so slowly that if we get into the warm, dry part of the pattern, the drought would come back very fast. So it's still a very abnormal weather pattern. We're fortunate to be in the wetter part of it, but we're going to really have to watch ourselves, because as soon as we get into the dry part of this, such as most of the American West has had, we're going to be losing our soil moisture quite rapidly.
What does this cold winter-like weather look for people who may have already got their garden in the ground? I almost did last week, too.
Well, one of the things that the spring weather is so unreliable around here, it looks lousy if you've got warm season plants like tomatoes, melons. The cool stuff, lettuce and things like that will do fine. But we might actually get a freeze tomorrow night or the next night if it clears out. And the soil is too cold to allow decent growth in our warm season plants. Tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, all the summer favorites are not going to be doing very well until we get into the next warm spell.
Well, I'm in trouble because finally this weekend I had planted some seeds in the little peat pots, and for years I've been saying, I wish I'd have started me some plants here about 3 weeks ago, and this year I did it, and they're getting all leggy. I bought some sets to go out, some broccoli and some cabbage, and they've been sitting in the south-facing window just sort of reaching and good, and I put them out on the weekend, so maybe the big ones will be all right, but the little 2-inch tall ones, not so good.
Broccoli and cabbage, the brassicas are very tough. They'll take it. If you'd put out your tomatoes, my advice, and this is something I do anyway, is milk jugs, those gallon plastic jugs that you would otherwise recycle, cut off the bottom of those, leave the cap off, and stick it over the plant. You've got a little solar greenhouse and protection against hail. And you let the plant grow until the top starts to stick out of the hole, and then you take it off. And I've been doing that in the spring for many years, and it works quite well usually. It's not foolproof. If it gets to 100 degrees in May, it might cook those little babies.
No, that
so
was
you
last
gotta watch
year.
That.
That was last year.
Yeah, that was last year. But it holds the moisture in, it holds the heat in, and it provides significant weather protection, especially for those May and early June hailstorms.
Well, that's wonderful. You've earned every cent we don't pay you, John. Folks, this is all a volunteer operation. So
A little bit about everything. Yeah,
I tell you, that's terrific. We appreciate it very much. I know you said you had to sprint out of here about this time, John, but we really hope every time you can come in, we'd love to have you.
Well, it's been fun. I'm planning on coming back next week.
Terrific.
Excellent.
All right. See you then.
Thanks. And treat those state flowers well. They're not causing you hay fever.
Oh, well, if I must. We also have in the studio, as you've seen, Justine Marshall. Hi, Justine.
Hi.
Now, you're a student at UNL in UNO territory, right?
UNO, yeah.
Okay. So you're in Omaha, and what's your field of study?
I'm doing environmental science with a concentration on earth science.
Good
So
deal.
lots of geology.
That's good. Now, the reason that we asked Justine to come in is she was at the Omaha Public Power District Board meeting a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago now, I guess it was. And you told a story there as part of the community feedback about the North Omaha power plant and the pollution it causes, and it has to do with your athletics, right?
Yeah, well, I'm not an athlete at the college by any means, but I love being outside, riding my bike every day, going running, and I've had to work out in the gym a lot, well, because of the weather for one thing, but because of when I work out outside, I have a lot of trouble with my asthma. And I've never had a lot of trouble with it. It was just sports induced in high school, and I didn't have to worry about it except during track season. But since I moved to Omaha, it's progressively gotten worse.
So, I don't think I had ever even heard of athletically induced asthma.
It's just, I can breathe fine normally, like my lungs are 100% capacity if I'm just sitting here. But with sports, whenever like I have to run really hard, I have to really like breathe in, it's like asthma. They get constricted. I get mucus. It's hard to breathe. It'll burn. I
That's-
cough a lot.
That's kind of tough if you're trying to run fast, I imagine.
Yeah.
So you don't get asthma when you're not exercising,
Well,
or
lately I have been walking up the steps. Is like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? But not.
and
used to
and
be
you
like
just
that.
moved here not too long ago. Where
About a year ago.
from?
From Grand Island, Nebraska.
And you noticed it when you got to Omaha?
I moved here in the summer, and I would go and work out, and I'm like, why am I so short of breath? It happened like a few months after I moved in, and I thought it was just because it was more hilly, because Grand Island's pretty flat. But then by the end of the summer, it was getting even worse. Like, I remember I was riding my bike on this like flat trail. It was the fall, and I'm like, I had to stop because I couldn't breathe. I'm like, what is wrong with me? I've been working out all summer. I'm like, why can't I ride my bike? And then I didn't really think anything of it. I just was like, okay, I guess I can't breathe today. I noticed some days it's worse than others. In the winter, it wasn't. Well, I guess I didn't work out outside during the winter.
Yeah, and I bet it's the kind of thing where when you go to the doctor, which is typically going to be in a nice air-conditioned, climate-controlled building, maybe he doesn't really believe it's quite that bad of a problem, or is they used to seeing this now?
Well, in high school, I ran long distance, and I was having a lot of trouble, and I'm like, I don't really know why. I've been working out all season. I don't know why I'm getting worse. So I went in and he had me breathe in this thing, and he's like, oh, you have sports-induced asthma. Gave me an inhaler. I was good to go. And
So it must be pretty common then.
yeah, it is pretty common, actually.
You know, that's just not right. That's just not right. You're trying to do the right thing. You're going outside. You're exercising, and you're breathing the air, good fresh air, right? And that's just not right.
So what happened at the OPPD meeting? Why did you feel the need to go there and speak up about the coal plant in North Omaha?
I found out about the people that live in North Omaha. It didn't really seem like they had a voice, and their rates of asthma are so much higher. So I was thinking, well, I'm a student. I'm trying to get the environmental club to come with me to one of the meetings in the future to speak, to show them that, hey, people that, the typical person that lives in North Omaha is a minority. So just that I am white, a student going to school, just like another voice, I guess, to show them, hey, it's not just, I don't know how to explain it.
The minority population in, African Americans specifically in Omaha have a asthma rate which is between 18 and 19%, which is twice as high as Caucasian rate for asthma in the rest of Omaha, and most of that is, I believe, east of 42nd Street. So when we're talking about asthma in Omaha, we're looking at triggers. What's triggering the asthma attacks? And North Omaha Station, like Justine was discussing when she went there, it was the pollution from the plant really contributes to asthma attacks. So do you think that have you noticed just breathing outside? Because I exercise a lot, and I've lived in a few big cities in the last couple of years, and Austin, Texas, and I've lived in Chicago. Chicago wasn't that bad, but I remember running in Austin the first day I got there, right along the interstate, just breathing all that particulate matter in, and almost having my first asthma attack. I have had asthma attacks since then, but you can just tell when you get to a city like this that the air is not as clean as out in the country, and possibly where you lived before. Is that your experience?
Yeah, because I noticed it pretty quickly moving here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the urban, the concentration of the vehicle traffic and the coal-fired pollution layered on top of that. I guess it gives you not much chance to escape.
Well, I completely see that. Well, I moved here. I didn't even put two and two together because I never lived in a big city before. So I'm like, well, I can't breathe. I don't know why. And then the more educated I got about the issues facing Omaha, I'm like, oh, that makes perfect sense because I do live east of 42nd Street. So of course it would affect me more than if I lived out west.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Sure. Although there's a number of coal-fired plants out west, it also depends on how the winds blow. What the specific pollution patterns are. But yeah, this is not the only time I've heard the approximate dividing line of 42nd Street. It's east and west.
Some days it's worse than others?
Sure.
Because I've noticed that too. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't breathe at all today.
Yeah. Weather, pressure, all of those things contribute to the the air quality. Douglas Health County Department, they monitor the air. They have several monitors in the city. The EPA looks at their monitors. You can actually go to the Douglas Health County's website and see what the air quality in your city is. The other day, and I just looked at Lincoln and Omaha and compared the two. Lincoln's air quality was an A, so it had a pretty good quality. Omaha's was a B. I've seen it C. I've seen it D. I've heard the mayor say that we're almost in non-attainment, where we're breaking certain EPA laws. So, it depends. It varies. But if you're in a highly polluted area and you're constantly breathing that in, that's definitely going to trigger an asthma attack.
I remember the first time I really started taking ozone seriously. I was in South Louisiana, in Baton Rouge, and I was sitting outside again, trying to be outside, having a meeting with the Louisiana Environmental Action Network folks, and they're not just a few miles from the huge Exxon refinery, which has been a sore in the side of Baton Rouge for a long time. And there was an ozone alert, and you could sort of feel the air, it just didn't feel right when you were breathing it. And man, the next day I came down sick. It was terrible. It was terrible, and it was clearly related to the stress, one thing on top of the other, but it was that horrible air quality that put me down. Got my attention pretty darn well.
Mm-hmm. And we don't have the best air quality in this country by far, but I don't know if either of you, have you looked at photos of Shanghai lately?
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen those?
Sometimes they wear masks.
Yeah.
They are.
It looks like fog always.
Beijing is really awful too.
Yeah.
There was a lot of that about the time of the Olympics. They were talking about the air quality. Of course, they get a lot of their electricity by burning coal, just like we did in our industrial development phase. Of course, they have more wind power and more solar power than we do, but also a lot of coal burning still. Even though they're phasing out the dirtiest of the coal plants, they're still burning. And it reminds us that back in the 50s, one of the big events that got everybody's attention about air pollution in general was the event in London, England, where, of course, they've always burned a lot of coal, and they had an inversion and killed hundreds of people. And you don't think of that in the civilized world, but boom. And that's really started to change.
And I remember reading that. I'm pretty familiar with that. But was that the weather? I mean, obviously they just had too much industry, but then the weather pattern or something that week just kind of kept everything on the ground. And
it's like everything stacks. You had the pollution, and then you have the weather that keeps it there, and then it stayed for a long time, and just one thing adds to the other, and it can really back you up, and it's poison. It shuts down your systems, and it affects not only the lungs that you feel, but the particles go through the wall of the lung, and it affects lots of other bodily systems, including your heart. Mm-hmm. And that's just evil. What they call the very very fine particulate matter. It's just incredibly tiny. You wouldn't think, and here we go again. You wouldn't think that, but something that small could cause that big of a problem. Mm-hmm. But it sure as heck does.
Let's talk about some of the ways we can, stop some of these problems, mitigate them. I know that Justine is the vice president of a group, the UNO Environmental Group.
Yep, that's right.
Can you tell us a little bit about that club?
We are an on-campus club to raise awareness for environmental issues. Locally is what we try to. We're going to clean up Standing Bear Lake March 26th, I believe. We're helping with the bicycle fashion show to promote people to ride their bikes. I just rode my bike to campus on the last day of school, actually, because it was nice. Took my final, and I'm like, yes.
That's great.
Feel good endorphins. Good on my test. But then on the way home, I was like, I can't breathe again. But the environmental club, we're gonna do some stuff this summer. So, forget where it was. We're just an on-campus organization.
Good.
I just went to a meeting with some of the sustainability leaders. We are working on building a sustainability center on campus.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we did a Q&A with other area leaders on campus.
So there is that part of the school of the environmental studies or the business school, or do they collaborate?
It's going to encompass everything. They want to make a minor in sustainability that you can attach to any kind of major, like psychology, aviation. It doesn't have to just be earth studies, because so many people do want to get into sustainability. It's a growing trend. And eventually they want to have an entire major for sustainability. And they're hoping to have that minor set up by fall 2014, I believe. So they're just working on raising funding right now.
Now, is the organization? I think we spoke probably over a month ago about divestment campaign. Is your group involved with that?
We were
still?
working on it, but we're such a small group that we're trying to recruit members right now because we shot a video on campus. It was part of a nationwide campaign for divestment, and we only had about 8 people show up. So, I mean, there was a divestment set in a couple days ago where 11 members went into the president of the campus's office and refused to leave.
No kidding.
Yeah, it was awesome. They generated all this community support. But I feel like we're not.
Is that in Wisconsin? Is that the one you're discussing? There's one in Minneapolis. Well, one in Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin. Yeah.
Was that a couple days ago? It happened?
Yeah, I think it's just yesterday, or maybe it was 2 days ago. But yeah,
It might have been yesterday.
I saw it in the news.
Days
So
blur together.
Yeah.
But yeah, we could definitely do something like that. But the environmental club wants to recruit more, so divestment is one of our focuses. Like we'll probably talk about it at our lake cleanup in May.
May 26th, I think you
Yeah.
said. All right.
It's at Sandy Bay Lake. I think we're gonna meet there at 2:00. But I'm not 100% sure yet.
Well, when you get your plans finalized, come on and talk about it, or we'll send us a note and we'll mention it on air. Maybe get you a couple more volunteers.
Okay. And
Excellent.
anyone that's listening, if you want to come to the Bancroft Bicycle Fashion Show, it's May 17th. The doors open at 5 for social hour, and then the fashion show starts at 7. So we're gonna be modeling vintage clothing from like local stores.
Oh, no
The bike
kidding.
shops donated their bicycles. They're gonna be on display. We'll have community bike art.
Well, that sounds like fun.
It's gonna be a lot of fun.
Is it going to be a raffle? You get to win stuff?
Oh, that's a good idea. Not that I know of yet, but I'm meeting with them Friday, so I'll have to bring that up.
Tell them we said so.
They want a raffle.
That's it. Well, so I think it's easy to get discouraged sometimes when you start out with a small group and you think, well, we can't do anything. But I think if you think about it, every group that ever was starts small. I mean, I don't know of any group that ever started with like 1,000 members and immediately got what they wanted and everybody disbanded and went to the bar, went home, whatever they do.
I actually recruit people at the bar.
There you go. Well, that's where you talk to people, right?
just
Yeah.
don't organize Saturday and Sunday mornings right, with these folks.
We did a plastic bag drive on campus, and we got like 4 or 5 recruits from that. We got
Okay.
just-
Now, what is that?
Oh well, we asked. We advertised on Earth Day. We did an Earth Week on campus with G-Bases. Student government has a sustainability committee, and then Edible Omaha had a presentation Wednesday night. So just like an entire week of Earth Day events.
Terrific.
So we were able. A lot of people don't even know there is an environmental club. So we were able to like spread awareness. The local news stopped by. We gave an interview about that. So
Nice. Very good. Very good indeed. Well, that's how you start, and that's what counts. You're organizing, from the bottom up, and
we're a small group, but we're pretty passionate. So
there you go, and you'll get that will attract a lot of people, I think, in a pretty short order, and let them know you're there and you care, and because most people, I think, do care, they just don't have the first clue about what to do.
I completely agree with that. Or they want to change, but they don't know like what. Like so many people think they're doing something good, but then they find out, oh, that wasn't actually that good. So then they get discouraged to try new things in the future. Like buying low-fat food, like it's actually not that good for you. And then people find out, they're like, well, what is good?
Yeah, when so much of the information is driven by manufacturers and advertising, you hear all these contradictory things. And I've, just like you said, I've heard a lot of people say, well, next week they'll be saying this, and the next week they'll be saying that. So, it's hard to parse sometimes.
Well, you have something to do. If you're a student at UNO, you can join the UNO Environmental Club. Contact Justine Marshall. Is the meetings going to be the same?
No, a lot of people couldn't come, even myself included, couldn't come to the Thursday night meetings.
Okay.
So we're going to rotate them. Next semester we'll have like a lunch meeting once a month, probably Thursday or Wednesday night meeting. I don't know, weekends are busy, but we're going to rotate them.
Good. And how would they find out? Is there a website, part of the campus website?
We have a
Facebook?
Facebook page. I think it's UNO. It's EC UNO.
Okay.
If you search Environmental Club UNO, you'll find it.
Okay. Good.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for coming out and telling us about the club, and we appreciate it. You're welcome to stick around
Yeah,
when
please do.
we have our next
Okay.
our next person come on, who is a good friend of mine, and she is one of the only, I think, investigative journalists in the city of Omaha. Her name's Kitrin Zykow.
Don't say that.
I know, I knew
Don't say
I knew she didn't want me to say that, but I'm going to say it. Some of the things that she writes are incredible and in depth, and it takes some time to do what she does and to really investigate the issues. And the reason we brought her in here today is because today at UNO there's an expo at the Student Center for Peace and Justice. And Medea Benjamin, who co-founded Code Pink, which is a peace and social justice organization. She also founded Global Exchange, which is an organization that brings fair trade to the market. She's in town. She's speaking tonight. And Kitrin wrote a really amazing piece called The Drone Debate. So I brought her on here to talk a little bit about the article that she wrote and about the expo tonight. And I know that we just had lunch earlier today with Medea. So feel free to let us know about your article and what's going on today.
Well, the Peace and Justice Expo has been going on in Omaha intermittently since 2004. And a local mental health therapist named Steve Thyberg got the idea that he'd like to do for Peace and Justice what they did for Earth Day. And we don't have a global Peace and Justice Day yet, but, maybe that's something that Omaha can give to the world. And they haven't had a Peace and Justice Expo in a couple of years because Steve has been very busy with his mental health practice. And he told me that he's currently working in the King's Science and Technology Center. That's like a middle school or a high school up in North Omaha on an anti-bullying project. And so that's consuming all of his time. And Frances Mendenhall, who is a longtime activist in Omaha, and she had her own TV show on cable access TV. She's a dentist, but she does a lot of volunteer work in her spare time on social justice issues. She said, we have to bring Medea Benjamin, in Code Pink to Omaha to talk. And so they decided to throw together a Peace and Justice Expo this year, and they were very grateful that UNO stepped in. Their School of Social Work actually assigned a class to learn about event production. So there's going to be about 30 groups with booths in the Milo Bale Student Center starting at 6 o'clock from 6 to 9, and Medea Benjamin is scheduled to speak at 7 o'clock. And anybody listening should get in their car and go on over there and hear her speak in person, because we just had the opportunity to listen to her speak on KFAB, and she really held her own with a very conservative radio talk show host. I was deeply impressed with her and terribly intimidated because I was like, I don't think I could hold my own one-on-one. I'm a writer, and writers have the luxury of thinking and writing and rewriting, and when you have to actually think on your feet and talk and speak and think at the same time, I'm always amazed by someone who can take a curveball, because man, he kept hitting her, and she just kept coming back with really good retorts. So
she's had practice.
Yes, she's had practice. Yeah, Medea is 60, and she has basically been she's been deep into trying to create a socially just world since she was in college. She was a political science major, and then she's done what she's done her whole life has been, how can I make the world a better place? Mm-hmm. Where can I insert myself to make the world a better place?
She's done it in a number of very different ways.
Yes.
That's that, and now you see more than one kind of fair trade coffee, more than one kind of fair trade goods, and but you had to have someplace to start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Nike campaign really brought the issue into people's minds. Like, oh my God, where are my shoes coming from, and who made them, and what is their life like, to so that I can have this fancy pair of shoes on my feet.
Right. And like we were saying with May Day, it all comes around in the circle. That's the if you have no place to buy affordable clothes but Walmart, and you walk in and all of a sudden there's the big headline about the factory collapse in Bangladesh, and you realize that that's where the relatively good union jobs went. First they went from the Northeast to the American South to Mexico, and then just all over the world. And it's, it comes back to haunt you, and all you get is a cheap, $5 piece of clothing.
Right.
Not such a good deal. But Medea helped to change that conversation, and that's a pretty darn big thing for one pretty small person, actually.
She's itty bitty. I wanted. Graham and I were just at a retreat up in North Omaha, up in Ponca Hills, and she was on the radio with what is the host's name from KFAB?
Chris Rogers.
Chris Rogers.
Okay.
Is that it?
Yeah,
Chris Rogers?
it's something.
Or is it Matthews?
No.
Chris Matthews?
No, it's not Chris.
We're
Matthews.
sorry,
I think it's
KFAB.
Chris
We don't know
Rogers.
who you're. We don't listen to you guys. We don't know who's on your shows. But anyway, so I thought it was Rush Limbaugh for a second when I walked in the door because he has that kind of voice. I'm like, holy
I'm sorry.
cow. And so anyway, when the thing was over, when the talk was over, I asked the hosts if Medea was here or did she go down to the radio station. They're like, no, she's here. And I said, where is she? And the person said she's the shortest person in the room, and she really was. She's about all of 5 feet tall, maybe.
Yeah. I first met her, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago now at a conference in D.C., and it was.
She's a little powerhouse.
Very much so. It's amazing, and she puts all the energy to good use. I know she's run for public office in California, which is where she hails from. And
no, actually, she is a Long Island girl. And
Long
I
Island?
asked her that. I said, "Where'd you grow up?" And she said, "On Long Island." I'm like, "Oh, where?" Because I know Long Island. I'm from
okay.
Pennsylvania.
Right.
And she said Freeport, and I'm like, "You got to be kidding me!" I mean, she was raised at the beach.
Oh,
the
man.
idea that she's a beach girl, and when I went to school in the 1980s, girls from Long Island wore hot pink fingernail polish. So it's
She
funny
still
to me.
does.
It's funny to me that she co-opted this ultimate feminine color, this Barbie kind of
Right.
color, and she's turned it into this political statement. And I'm like, you go, girl.
and she's been a leader in the peace movement, of course, with Code Pink. As I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, it was when they took and delivered a pink slip to President Bush for being a warmongering.
Okay, well, what her website says, and I can read it to you from the article. According to their website, the name Code Pink plays on the former Bush administration's color-coded Homeland Security alerts, yellow, orange, red, that signaled terrorist threats. The Code Pink alert is a feisty call for people to wage peace. The organization's mission is to reduce militarism globally so that resources can be redirected into things like healthcare, education, or green jobs. And but I asked her about pink, and she said, "Yeah, I said, was it associated with any other use of that shade of pink?" And she said, "No, it just had to do with tweaking the Bush administration's,
Which
Code
they did
Red.
so well.
Yeah. Oh, that was a nightmare. There were so many things about the early Homeland Security that were downright hilarious. Remember the duct tape thing?
Oh, you seal everything up with duct
Duct
tape,
tape,
and
yeah.
the terrorists can't, or the
Everything
biological
became.
weapons can't come in.
Yeah, and even the name
It's nuts.
Homeland Security, I would never have chosen that. It just reminds me of the fatherland,
Yeah.
I mean, they did everything wrong. They just.
Well, not from their point of view. I
Well,
think
right.
it's quite coherent with their worldview and who they identify with, whether they want to admit it or not. And, I'm sure the same is true with the newly opened George W. Bush Presidential
The
Library.
library.
The library.
That's what Medea calls it.
The library.
Library.
The
why?
library.
Well, trust a
Library.
New
Oh,
Yorker
library.
not to know how to mispronounce something like a Southern boy. But we forgive her for that small shortcoming. And, of course, with this so-called national security issues, she's on it again with the drones.
With the drones. So if you would indulge me, I just wanted to read a couple of things out of her book here. This is from a chapter in Medea's book, Drone Warfare, Killing by Remote Control. And this chapter is called Murder by Drone, Is It Legal? And then she starts off the chapter with two quotes, one by Colonel Daniel Reisner, former head of the Israeli Defense Forces Legal Department. And he said, "If you do something for long enough, the world will accept it. The whole of international law is now based on the notion that an act that is forbidden today becomes permissible if executed by enough countries. International law progresses through violations. We invented the targeted assassination thesis, and we had to push it. At first, there were protrusions that made it hard to insert easily into the legal molds. 8 years later, it is in the center of the bounds of legitimacy." And then an American, Bruce Rydell, former CIA officer, his quote is much more succinct. He writes, "We're not in kindergarten on this anymore. We've been doing this targeted killing since 2001, and there's a well-established protocol." And one of the points Medea made when I was talking to her was that it's taken 8 years for Congress to have hearings on the subject of drone warfare. It's just something that's just been accepted and not questioned.
And if nobody questions it, certainly not the people in power, then, as they said, it just becomes a fact. It's speaking, just ordinarily. Who doesn't know what a drone is? Anybody that pays attention, listens to the news, is probably going to know what you say a drone. You're not talking about the worker bee, also called a drone. You're talking about the remote-controlled flying aircraft that can go in and target what is supposed to be cleverly and accurately identified terrorists.
They have toy drones now. Toy drones. You can go to Walmart in the toy section where they have little Hot Wheels cars, and they actually make a drone. Incredible.
I went into the bicycle shop over the weekend to buy a bicycle seat. And the proprietor there, one of his friends had come in, and he had just brought this toy helicopter that I could hold in two hands. Lightweight, plastic toy helicopter. And he says, "You got to see this. Hold on a minute, folks. I'll be right with you." And he takes this and he puts it down in the floor amongst all the bicycles, just in a little open space in the aisle. And he gets his controller, and that thing goes up and it goes around, and it's got like four sets of rotors, that are off to the side. It's really sci-fi
Add
stuff.
bombs and
Well, I mean, people have always had remote control like airplanes.
Right.
I mean, and they
Sure.
were toys. It was just you'd stand in a farm field and play with your remote controlled, aircraft. And so that doesn't bother me so much as the idea that they've reshaped it so that it's a drone, because a drone is really only used for, surveillance or killing, but, it's like the militarization of this toy. And
they claim now the amazing one of the amazing things to me is that they've got a video feed, real-time video feed, and I guess they have a better internet connection than I do, but the controller can be half a world away.
most often the controller is half a world away.
Like in Dakota or maybe up the road here.
And
Maybe in the
I
house over there.
Yeah, I asked Nebraskans for Peace. They wrote their cover story in. They publish a magazine called Nebraska Report every 2 months, and their cover story for the April, May is about drones. And I said, no one really knows what goes on down at Offutt and whether they have any involvement with drones. So I think that's something that they're going to research, whether or not people are sitting, here in Nebraska and killing people half a world away. But the definite, base where they do it is north of Las Vegas, Nevada. That's the one that gets the most media attention.
They're switching over the Des Moines Air Force Base. They're getting rid of decommissioning all of the airplanes there, at least a lot of them. And they're turning into a base for drones. And there was a protest, I think, just earlier today. Some friends of mine that went out there to the Air Force Base and have been protesting that. So
I know in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, there was another command center. It's pretty specific and high tech, but it's certainly not something that couldn't be duplicated in any number of physical locations, and so that you have these, these remote control pilot. It reminds me a little bit of the old science fiction series by Orson Scott Card, Ender's Game, and in a nutshell, the whole book and the series of books was about the space recruiting these young kids, and they're telling them they're playing these video games and they're training, and then it turns out that they really are massacring, thousands of sentient beings every second that they're playing this game, and it's freaky. It's that kind of remove. And it penetrates, the civilian world too. The FAA is formulating the requirements and regulations to get the rules by which drones will be used in the United States under a new regime no later than 2015. And the fellow in the bike store, I told him, I says, all you need now is a camera, man. You'd be good. He said, oh yeah, they make cameras. They're commonly available now. So the capability of the drones, the military drones, are coming to the civilian world, and it's acceptable.
I've read about paparazzi using drones to get pictures of celebrities, even so.
Wouldn't you know it?
I read about that news too.
Hey, that's smart.
If that's the only thing that happened as a bit of fallout from this, talk about military technology being used in the civilian world. It's crazy.
I'm sure they'll come up with worse things.
Yeah, probably.
Here's another excerpt from Medea's book. As Ralph Nader observed in a column published in the fall of 2011, drone technology is becoming so dominant and so beyond any restraining framework of law or ethics that its use by the U.S. government around the world may invite a horrific blowback. 2 days after the piece was published, a 26-year-old man from Massachusetts, Rezwan Firdas, was arrested and accused of plotting to attack the Pentagon and U.S. Capitol with small drone aircraft filled with explosives. The plan he delivered to undercover agents involved using 3 remote-controlled planes similar to military drones guided by GPS equipment. Firdas, a Northeastern University graduate, that's Boston, with a degree in physics, had already used his skills to convert 8 cell phones into detonators, supplying them to undercover agents who he thought were affiliated with Al-Qaeda. FBI agents seem to have egged him on to go further, providing him with assault rifles, grenades, 25 pounds of C4 plastic explosives, and even an F-86 remote-controlled aircraft. According to the criminal complaint filed in the court, the planes were large enough to carry a variety of payloads, including a lethal payload of explosives, could use a wide range of takeoff and landing environments, and could fly different flight patterns than commercial airlines, thus reducing detection. The Capitol's dome would be blown to smithereens, Firdas was quoted in the complaint as saying. If he had succeeded in creating and launching a suicide-bombing drone, Firdas would arguably only have beaten the U.S. government at its own game. Less than a month before news of the alleged plot was made public, the U.S. Army announced it was awarding military contractor AeroVironment a $4.9 million contract to supply it with a small, backpack-sized drone capable of crash diving into a target kamikaze style. But what was interesting to me, Medea's book was written in 2011 and 12. There's an article on Mother Jones about how the FBI ignored the current accused, Tamerlan, help me with the last name, Sarnev, and they focused on entrapping this guy. It wasn't like he came up with the idea, and I mean, they literally focused on entrapping this guy into this and provided him with C4 explosives and assault rifles and grenades and yada, 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 and completely ignored someone else who ultimately has been accused of a bombing.
And this is not a new pattern, as I recall, back in the Vietnam War era. Peace activists, usually when you found people who were agitating for violent actions, you would find, the local Red Squad or the FBI had an agent in there, and they were not there just to have information. A lot of this came out in the congressional hearings conducted by Senator Frank Church, and so it's not some left-wing conspiracy theory. This is in the congressional record by people who were involved, and the speaking of near Pennsylvania, the Camden Draft Board, poor people went in, peace activists, pacifists, not just any anti-war group, but pacifists, religious people, went in and poured blood on the draft records in the office of the draft board, and turns out, well, the people who were stirring that up were the FBI, and it's just amazing from the amount of lawlessness on the part of law enforcement, quote unquote.
Well, I think sometimes it's so hard to figure out who's legitimately doing something that people get the idea, some people in law enforcement, I don't want to make a blanket statement about everybody, but some people in law enforcement think that it's easier to entrap some moron into doing something that he wouldn't have done in the first place, because at least you get a conviction, and at least you're somewhat in control of the situation, because you're not really giving him plastic explosives. You're giving him something that seems like plastic explosives, and so you get your arrest and your conviction. Whereas in the real world, when you have to guess who's doing what, you're going to get surprised a lot. And Mother Jones has a really wonderful article on how many different Muslim young men have been entrapped in the past 10 years into crimes. And there's 150 convictions and a pool of 500 people who were targeted and who were attempted to be entrapped. You just got to go on the Mother Jones website. The journalist's name is Trevor Aronson. But
and meantime, the folks, the militia folks, like the people who blew up the building in Oklahoma City, they're just sort of sailing along. And again, it's a pattern that goes way back.
You think they're sailing along? What do you mean they're sailing along?
Well, I don't see I don't see a lot of prosecutions coming levied against those groups. I mean, I know they're infiltrated. I know law enforcement is there, but then again, there was an FBI informant in the same car with the civil rights workers who were murdered back in the day in the civil rights era in Mississippi. And it's that they seem to.
Wait a second. There is an FBI informant in.
Yeah,
what
we
car?
should do a different show on that.
Yeah, I'll have to fact check all that.
You please do. Yeah, good. Did we just get you to write that segment?
None of that sounds familiar to me. Yeah, that case with the kid at Northeastern, that was sort of like the worst case confluence of drone stupidity with entrapment, bad decisions. Because I think 9 times out of 10, entrapment is the wrong choice. It's a waste of our taxpayer dollars. You should put those resources into trying to figure out how you find out what real crimes are being planned by people who are honestly planning them themselves, rather than, the government should never be in the position of coming up with the crime and trying to convince you to commit it. That's crazy.
You think?
That's craziness. They have to stop this.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things they have to stop.
Now, is this just another conspiracy theory, or is this fairly well documented? That
oh no, you got to go on the Mother Jones website.
Okay.
And the journalist's name is Trevor Aronson, I think, but he won an award for this investigation that he did. I can email you the link later on, and it's a really comprehensive database of people who have been targeted and entrapped into stupid things that they weren't planning themselves, and it's just really bad policy.
seems immoral and anti-democratic
and a waste of money. It's a waste of money, And
I want to get back to this drone debate.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit more about the article that you wrote.
Well, I know I'm reverting to reading quotes from her book, but I think she does a way better job of describing this than I could secondhand. There is a website that folks should go to called Pakistan Body Count, and that's pakistanbodycount.org. It lists the date of every drone attack in Pakistan and whether those killed were suspected militants or civilians. As of last week, April 17th, the numbers given were 42 al-Qaeda and 430 Taliban killed, compared to 2,496 civilians and 330 foreigners killed. So by the numbers, the drone war is taking a much harder toll on the civilian population. Benjamin's book takes a closer look at these incidents and gives names to some of the victims. She writes, President Obama carried out his first drone strike just 3 days after his inauguration. It was in Pakistan on January 23, 2009. Initial reports said that the attack struck suspected terrorist hideouts, but in reality, the missile struck the home of Malik Gulistan Khan, a tribal elder and member of a local pro-government peace committee. It killed him and 4 other family members. I lost my father, 3 brothers, and my cousin in this attack, said Adnan, his 18-year-old son. Adnan's uncle claimed, we did nothing. We have no connection to militants at all. And then she lists another one. Drones have also killed our military allies. In November 2011, a U.S. airstrike mistakenly killed Pakistani soldiers who were camped along the Afghan border, leaving 24 dead. The strike came just before a long-planned major diplomatic gathering in Bonn, Germany, where over 100 countries and international organizations were gathering to discuss how to end the war in Afghanistan. Pakistan was a key player in the discussions, Benjamin writes. Due to public outrage over the airstrike, the Pakistani government refused to attend. And the drone war actually is not universally supported by members of the military. Two former members of the military actually wrote an editorial in the New York Times. David Kilcullen and former Army officer Andrew McDonald Exum co-wrote an op-ed piece in the New York Times on May 16, 2009, which stated, "Every one of these dead non-combatants represents an alienated family, a new desire for revenge, and more recruits for a militant movement that has grown exponentially even as drone strikes have increased." They cautioned that a frightened population might turn to violent extremists and against the faceless enemy that wages war from afar and often kills more civilians than militants.
You know, it's really funny. When I was in school not very long ago, I was thinking about all of the deaths attributed to Afghan and Iraq and Desert Storm, the first, the earlier war there. And I kept thinking to myself, I can't wait for the day that conventional warfare is over, that we can move away from that. And I wasn't thinking like having no war. I was thinking, all right, maybe relying on intelligence or just doing something differently. And this is not what I thought would happen. This, this is definitely not what I was thinking would happen. But I remember just hoping that I can't wait for the day that we don't have to send 100,000 troops overseas and watch them all get slaughtered. Well, now we're sending. We're not even sending a troop. They're flying over there from somebody in their basement, controlling it, and killing lots of innocent, civilians. So.
Well, people everywhere react the same way to acts of terror. People can think back, to how they felt and still feel about 9/11, watching the towers come down in New York. And if you're across town and you're getting ready to go to a wedding or something at a friend's house or a cousin's house, and all of a sudden, right where you're headed, you see a column of smoke, and it was a drone strike. No warning, no nothing. Then you're going to be at least as angry as we are, and it's not making us any friends.
This is a quote by Noor Bayram, who's a Pakistani photographer. "There are just pieces of flesh lying around after a drone strike. You can't find bodies. So the locals pick up the flesh and curse America. They say that America is killing us inside our own country, inside our own homes, and only because we are Muslims." So one can only hope that Medea's book, and there's another, Medea's an activist, and she's obviously writing a polemic. She wants to achieve a goal, but there's also a recent drone book by a journalist who's just laying out the facts, and he was on the lecture circuit last week and the week before. His name is Mark Mazzetti. He's a New York Times reporter. And so if you prefer facts without passion, you can read Mazzetti's book. If you like facts with passion, you could read Medea's book. But they're both making much of the same point. This isn't winning us any friends. This is making us lots of enemies.
And if you want to read facts in a local news outlet's newspaper, The Reader, I highly suggest you read Kitrin Zeikel's work. She does amazing things. So what's the website if people want to go online and see this recent article that you did?
Well, the best thing to do is go to www.thereader.com. And because of the way the search engine works, if you Google drone debate, it should pop up in the in the search engine, because sometimes it's a little hard to find things on our website. We're redoing it. Someday it'll be different, but sometimes it's hard to search for articles on the site.
And the newspaper's weekly, and it comes out.
The Reader comes out every week, so there's a new issue that'll be on the stands today and tomorrow. So it'll be, but you can always go down to the Reader. It's at 24th and M, and we always have extra copies if anybody wanted to pick up a copy of this. And I also recommend going to
And it's
Nebraskans
free.
for Peace. It's free, and Nebraskans for Peace. It's a UNL professor, and well, if you don't mind, can I read again?
We've got about 30 seconds.
I've got 30 seconds. Oh, okay. All right, so go to the Nebraskans for Peace website. Professor Hendrik Vandenberg wrote a great article about drones, and that's also online. It's called The Nebraska Report, Nebraskans for Peace, and their cover story this month is on drones. Excellent article by Vandenberg.
A couple of other websites before we have to go that we've been talking about. One is codepink.org. For the organization Code Pink that Medea Benjamin started, and of course the referenced Mother Jones article can be found at motherjones.com, and the article is called Inside the Terror Factory.
Don't forget you're listening to 1690 AM The One. You can go to mystation.1690amthe1.com and watch a recording of this or hear us live. Thank you both for coming into the studio today. We appreciate it. We hope to have you both back.
Right. Thank you, Kitrin
You're welcome. Thanks for having
and
us.
Justine.
Yeah.
You bet. We love it. Thanks much.
See you next
Good
time.
night.